Sithi ayuzowapolisa, ayuzowapole, ayamanxeba, amandla, nawethu. Long live the EFF, long live. Long live the EFF Students Command, long live. Long live the Commander-in-Chief, long live. Long live, long live. Thank you very much, National Chairperson. Want to take this opportunity to greet the leadership of the EFF and officials led by the Commander-in-Chief and President, the CCT, the provincial leaders who are here, the regional leaders who are here, the branch leaders, the delegates, and the leaders of the EFF Students Command. Commander-in-Chief, we want to thank you and your leadership for refusing to close this organization called the EFF. When they called you to the boardrooms and presented presentations to you and gave you essays and wrote long essays trying to justify why the EFF must be closed, you put your foot down and said, never in my name will I allow the EFF to be liquidated. How can the EFF be closed in a boardroom when it was never formed in a boardroom? Because the EFF was formed in Uncle Tom's, where you call domestic workers, where you call students, where you call the unemployed youth, where you call domestic workers, petrol attendants, the middle class of South Africa, the poorest of the poorest. They said to you, go and form the EFF. They didn't call you to a boardroom. This organization can't be closed in a boardroom. It was never formed in a boardroom. What will we say to the Marikana widows who came to you and said, we want an alternative to the ANC. The ANC has killed our husbands. The ANC has shot and killed the future of our children. Come and be an alternative to the ANC. The Marikana Widows President did not ask you to form the EFF so that you can save the ANC. That is not the mandate they gave you. They wanted you to form the EFF so that you can govern South Africa and be an alternative. What will we say to the fees must fall generation? When the police were shooting them, the EFF brought lawyers. When the police were kicking them out of institutions of higher learning, it was the EFF that stood with them. What will we say to them if we must liquidate this organization? What will we say to the workers who were insourced by the EFF Students Command? What will we say to them when they are now being paid higher wages, when they can now study and bring their children and get the same privileges as professors, as doctors, as academic staff? How are we going to explain to them when this organization is closed in the boardroom? What will we say to the millions of young people who, when they come at the middle of the year, at the beginning of the year, and they want to enter school, the EFF-SC through the Sizofuna Ngenkani campaign says to them, whether you can afford registration or not, siyangena nani? What will we say to them when this organization must be closed down? It can never be. It can never be, Comrade President. This organization can never close down in the boardroom because it was never formed in the boardroom. Members and activists of the Student Command continue to protect this organization. You have never been part of any other organization. You don't have any yellow blood in your skin. You don't have green blood. You don't have blue blood. Your virginity in politics was broken by the EFF. Defend the EFF Fight for the EFF. Never lose hope. Amandla! Fight for the unemployed youth. Fight for the students who want free education. Amandla! Two. Long live the EFF Students Command. Long live. Long live the EFF. Long live. Thank you, Chair.
Mandla, Amandla, you are going to sing, comrades. Let's finish this segment of our program. We're now going to be acknowledging all the written messages of support. We won't read them. The SG is going to find a creative way of flighting them in our last day of the conference so that we can all read and they will be published by the communications. Namibia EFF have sent us a message of support. Liberia EFF, Dr. Zaneto, an MP in Ghana, and Lesotho EFF, they have sent us messages of support. And the EFF movements in Africa are here. They are presented by their delegations. We now want to also acknowledge our special rapporteur to the United Nations on health issues, specializing in reproductive health care, Dr. Tlaleng Mufokeng. I saw her. I'm not sure if she's still here. She's one of us, representing us at a global stage from Ekwakwa. Thank you very much. There is that fighter who's an MPL of Gauteng. Koketso. Koketso, please come. We need to deliver the president with a political address. Limpopo, you can't be outshined by Koketso because we can't find him. Let's go. Someone please come take the mic. Limpopo. Someone please give someone in Limpopo a mic. The delegate of Limpopo and the #1 ground force of the economic freedom is about to take the stage. Let's deliver him properly, fighters.
Amandla, away two. Le fasile na gelabo go, oh mura, oh awiye. Oh yeah, girl. Yeah, le facile na gilavo go. Oh, oh yeah. Matso, arbete matso. Eh, gilavo go le vora kholo. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah, the politics, the change, oh yeah. Eh, narelabile, oretale jam, oh yeah, girl, oh yeah, girl. Narelabile uretale chan home. Oh yeah. Oh yeah girl. El kudala na kila Malema home. Oh yeah. Oh matso. El kudala na kila Malema oh yeah. Ela mulaya le torisiva. Oh, oh yeah. Oh yeah. Matsago. Ela mulaya le torisiva. Oh, oh yeah. Oh. El kudelana gila malema. Oh, oh yeah. Oh yeah. Ha, ha. Narela bile uratale cham. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah, abatamaya. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Ah, mato. Yeah, abatamaya. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah, makangola se bathoman run. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah, malumi zuma uthoman run. Oh yeah. Matsogo. Christiani ukhwile byani. Oh yeah. Oh yeah, gele. Solima Kangu ukhwile byani. Oh yeah. Oh yeah, gele. Makongolo se ale rebujen. Oh.
Amanda. Viva EFF, viva. I will EFF, I will. Tata EFF, Tata. Tata EFF, Tata. Thank you very much. Let's settle down, fighters. The National Chairperson, members of the Central Command Team, leaders of the provincial and regional command teams, international guests, distinguished members of the diplomatic corps, comrades from EFF structures across Africa, African continent, and in the diaspora, and all revolutionary delegates gathered here today. I stand here before you to extend a heartfelt and revolutionary welcome to this historic third National People's Assembly of the Economic Emancipation Movement. We acknowledge with great appreciation the presence of delegates from our branches and regional and provincial command teams whose unwavering commitment to the revolution is the bedrock of our movement. To our comrades representing the Central Command Team, international guests and diplomatic corps, your solidarity inspires our collective struggle. We extend revolutionary greetings and express gratitude to all those who sent their well wishes but could not join us today. To those who have been able to join us, your presence reaffirms the solid power of the call for economic freedom in our lifetime. Comrades, I stand before you today to welcome you all to this great festival of the branches of the EFF, the Third National People's Assembly of the Economic Emancipation Movement. Fellow fighters, today marks the achievement, yet again, of what many thought would not be possible as we stand before you to mark the continued life of this organization of the working class. We stand here today as a generation that has inherited the struggle for liberation and declared for all to know that we are a generation of economic freedom in our lifetime. Comrade delegates, we stand here not representing ourselves, but our ancestors who bled so we can stand here today and continue the historic struggle for the land and the economy to return to the native people of Africa. We stand here resilient, fearless, and determined to attain the goals and objectives of the millions who have come before us, who died fighting against colonial domination and exploitation. Fighters and compatriots, our presence here is another act of defiance and a page in the history books of the revolution which should never be forgotten. We have earned our rightful place and stand on the shoulders of giants who demonstrated that no determined effort to break us will ever succeed, because we represent the wills and aspirations of liberation heroes who died for our freedom. We stand on the shoulders of the Khoi and the San people, King Hintsa, Chief Mangoma, King Tsukukuni, King Makado, and King Shaka Senga Kakona, who, despite being armed with less sophisticated armaments, displayed conviction and fearlessness that gave them the strength and resolve to wage courageous wars of resistance. We stand on the shoulders of Mama Winnie Madikizela Mandela, Robert Sobukwe, Steve Biko, Peter Mukaba, Chris Hani, Mama Gaddafi, Thomas Sankara, Amilcar Cabral, Queen Nzinga, and many African giants who, despite a system determined to break the spirit of our people, refused to die and continue to live because of the ideas they represent. Fellow fighters, our presence here, after deliberate and coordinated efforts to destroy us, is another sign that the African spirit can never be broken. Delegates and the people of South Africa, the National People's Assembly of the EFF is the highest demonstration of democracy within the EFF and an exhibition of our commitment to being an organization that belongs to its own members. In the past 11 years, we have held a gathering of this nature, which constitutes itself as the highest decision-making body of our movement, on 2 occasions, having held the first National People's Assembly in Mangaung in the Free State in 2014, and the second National People's Assembly here in Nazareth in 2019, Johannesburg. Since our inception, despite the negative caricature of the EFF as a movement characterized by dictatorship, we have remained committed to this internal democratic process without fail. The NPA is a political sitting defined by ideas that will shape not only the direction of our movement, but also the direction of the country, the continent, and the posture of the left on international affairs. The NPA is a gathering of delegates from the most basic and organic units of our movement, the branches, and it is here that we will reflect on the gains, losses, and future of our generation. The NPA will determine the political direction of the movement, receive reports, engage in discussion documents, and ultimately give a mandate to a new crop of leaders who will constitute the central command team for the next 5 years. Fellow fighters, all our National People's Assemblies have occurred at definitive moments in the history of South Africa. And after these sittings, the EFF has managed to dictate and determine the political discourse in our country. The first National People's Assembly occurred when the nation was reeling from the tragedy of the brutal massacre of the 34 Lone Min mine workers in Marikana. And the former liberation movement had a firm electoral grip on our democracy, which gave them a sense of impunity, resulting in high levels of unchecked corruption. It was the formation of this movement, people's movement, that brought the Marikana massacre into the corridors of Parliament and shook the former liberation movement to its core, disrupting the hegemony held over our political system. It was the first National People's Assembly that resolved that we will be the representative of the poorest of the poor, the dejected masses of our people, and that we will be found on the streets, in the picket lines, in the villages, on the farms, in the townships, in councils, in legislatures, and in parliament. It was at that first National People's Assembly that a weapon was given to the abused and forgotten masses of our people. A weapon for domestic workers, garden cleaners, petrol attendants, mine workers, hawkers, the millions of unemployed youth, and those in the corporate sector who suffer at the hands of racism on a daily basis. It was from that moment that the political terrain in South Africa was redefined and changed for the better. The years following the first National People's Assembly saw fear being struck in the hearts of racists and within the white supremacist and capitalist power structure itself, as a true revolutionary alternative had arrived to take the baton of centuries of struggle against colonialism. Fighters and people of South Africa, the Second National People's Assembly happened at a point when the white capitalist establishment was cementing itself in South Africa, and as a result, it identified the EFF as enemy number one. This identification of our movement as an enemy resulted in a concerted campaign to destabilize the movement through smear campaign. We resolved at that assembly to solidify our posture as an anti-racist and anti-capitalist movement despite these challenges. At this third National People's Assembly, we are faced with a new moment wherein the EFF experienced its first electoral decline and suffered unprecedented levels of sabotage and infiltration. It is for this reason, delegates, that the theme for this NPA is defend, rebuild, and advance the struggle for economic freedom. Because for the first time, the revolution is under a genuine threat of disruption that risks delaying our freedom for generations to come. We have a duty to defend the gains of our emancipation movement and the ideas of the revolution from distortion and sabotage, because attempt to destroy the EFF will set the freedom of our people back for another 100 years. It is our duty to rebuild this economic emancipation and the faith our people have in the principle of economic freedom and justice, because the EFF remain the most potent and viable weapon for the liberation of African people. It is our revolutionary responsibility to advance the struggle for economic freedom in our lifetime, because our diagnosis that political freedom without economic freedom is meaningless remains true. And we as a collective and a movement remain the most reliable vehicle to carry the baton forward towards true liberation. It is this basic principle that must shape all our interaction at this third National People's Assembly. We must bear in mind at all material times that the fate of generation to come rests in our hands. Delegates and people of South Africa, inherently, the EFF is a movement rooted in ideology and tools of analysis that have shaped revolutions across history and continue to do so today. In the EFF, we purposefully subscribe to Marxism to analyze the class contradictions in society. Leninism as a guide to our perspective on state and the purpose of forming a leftist organization, and Fanonism to appropriately characterize the impact of colonial conquest and racism. Fighters, in order to know who we are, we must appreciate what we stand for and ask ourselves, what is Marxism? When we call ourselves Marxist, we must be able to explain it in the simplest term so that we can relate it to ordinary people in our communities. We have seen many self-proclaimed Marxists fail to break down this revolutionary ideology. Even in their mother tongue, they can't explain it. Yet they claim to understand the theory of Marxism. Those are not Marxists. They are petty bourgeoisies who are engaged in what we characterize in our organizational character and redesign discussion document as academicism. Academicism refers to the trend that separates the theoretical development from practical activity. This trend supposes that organization is less important than theory. To apply this Marxist method without focusing on the revolutionary socialist implications, to over-intellectualize Marxism by focusing on its academic application, which only relate to the few who have received an elite education and do not attempt to translate Marxism, Leninism to common language. Fighters. Marxism was developed in the mid-1800s by Karl Marx and his comrade Friedrich Engels, who together formulated the Communist Manifesto. Some of the other important works of Karl Marx and Engels are the 3 volumes of Das Kapital, which provide a critique of capitalism and the political economy. To understand Marxism, we must grasp 2 of its foundational principles, namely historical materialism and dialectical materialism. We must ask the question, what is materialism? Materialism, unlike idealism, is a philosophical principle that places the material world at the center of political and social reality. In other words, according to materialism, what we experience is informed by the material world around us, and all social and political changes are functions of our material reality and experience. However, without dialectics, the theory is incomplete. Dialectics, as developed by Engels, can be understood as the union of the opposite. In dialectics, we see the thread of thesis, antithesis, and synthesis. History, as we know it, can be explained through these tensions. In the first stage, its thesis is presented. The thesis is met with antithesis, which opposes the initial thesis. Ultimately, the thesis and antithesis reconcile, giving rise to the synthesis. Although this idea of dialectics was conceptualized by Engels on the basis of idealism, for Marx and Engels, dialectics became a science of the laws of motions and the development of human society, nature, and thought. In other words, without the bourgeoisie, there is no proletariat. Without a master, there is no slave. And without the oppressor, there is no oppressed. Fighters, dialectical materialism covers 3 foundational laws and principles that must guide our scientific analysis as we engage in the struggle. The first is the unity and struggle of the opposite. The second is transformation of quantity into quality. And lastly, the negation of the negations. At the center of the unity and struggle of the opposite is the law of contradictions, which is the basic law of material dialectics. It states that everything has its own external and internal contradictions that determine its resolution. Fighters, the unity and struggle of the opposite helps us understand the nature of struggle and conflict between social groups, such as class struggle between the bourgeoisie and the proletariat. All things in the universe exist in a constant state of change and development. Conflict, therefore, through the Marxist lens of dialectics, is not only negative, as it can be a necessary part of the process of revolutionary change and development. This law also helps us to understand that change is interconnected and that change in one aspect of our revolutionary struggle can lead to change in another aspect. We must therefore assert that the struggle we are engaged in and the conflict with the capitalist mode of production is necessary to bring about social development and change towards attainment of economic freedom in our lifetime. Fighters, the law of transformation of quantity into quality explains that revolutionary qualitative change is a product of gradual quantitative changes. In other words, to understand change, we must locate its foundation in the transformation of quantity into quality. In our context, our struggle, revolution, represent qualitative change. The contradiction in the capitalist mode of production represent quantitative differences as they gradually change either positively or negatively. But the net effect is a revolution, which constitutes a qualitative change. For example, the contradiction within our party can be resolved by method of criticism and self-criticism, whose net effect is qualitative. Meanwhile, the contradictions between the bourgeoisie and the proletariat is resolved through socialist revolution, which brings about fundamental change that through the lens of dialectical materialism is qualitative. Therefore, revolution is qualitative. Following on the laws of transformation of quality into quality, the final foundation principle of dialectical materialism is the negation of the negations. Fighters, this law can be simplified and understood as a new replacing and superseding the old. In chapter 32 of the first volume of Capital, Marx wrote, I quote, "The capitalist mode of appropriation, the result of capitalist mode of production, produces capitalist private property. This is the first negation of individual property as found in the labor of the proprietor. But capitalist production produces, with the certainty of law of nature, its own negation. It is the negation of negation. This does not re-establish private property for the producer, but gives him individual property based on the acquisition of the capitalist era. That is, on cooperation and the possession in common, the land and the means of production." Close quote. The first negations occurs when the old reaches its limit before the qualitative transformation occurs. Subsequently, the second negations occurs at the full realization of the new state. Be that as it may, in the Marxist sense, negation does not mean the complete destruction of the old state. Rather, in the process of transforming from one state to another, remnants of the old state remain in the new state. From slavery to feudalism, from feudalism to capitalism, and even in socialism, remnants of all three epochs remain, and this, Marx argued, will be overcome by the attainment of global communism. In simple terms, the negation of negations means the transformation of the old state into new state. Fighters, this is what Marxists, we argue that progress is not linear. It does not travel in a straight line. Progress travels in spirals. In the words of Lenin, I quote, "Human knowledge is not straight line, but a curve which endlessly approximates a series of circles, a spiral," close quote. Our ideas, therefore, are always in a process of gradual changes which can build up into revolutionary qualitative change due to the contradictions within them. These fighters are the three laws which forms the basis of dialectical materialism. They are scientific and universal and must thus guide our reading of the prevailing conditions and our engaged in the struggle. In the Communist Manifesto, Karl Marx argued, I quote, "The history of all up to this point existing society is the history of class struggle. Free men and slaves, patrician and plebeian, lord and serfs, guild masters and journeymen, in a word, oppressor and oppressed." I close quote. In other words, Fighters, Marxism characterized the engine of history and drive of social changes as the conflict between classes. The conflict between those who own the means of production and those who are forced to sell their labor to the owners of the means of production, the haves and the have-nots, the oppressor and the oppressed. In Marxism, class is defined by the relationship that a particular group share with the means of production. In the feudal era, which organized society under European royalty, a lord was a noble who owned land, and a serf was a peasant who worked the land in order to live on the land. The subsequent fall of European feudal societies and the rise of capitalism gave birth to the new but not so different contending classes, the bourgeoisie and the proletariat, whose contradictions were also informed by the relationship they shared with the means of production. Much like the noble during the feudal era, the bourgeoisie owned and controlled the means of production, whilst the proletariat, like the serfs, sold its labor to the bourgeoisie. Driving expensive cars and wearing designer clothes does not make one a bourgeoisie. Living in Sandton, Camps Bay, Umhlanga, or any other affluent suburb in South Africa does not make one a bourgeoisie. The bourgeoisie are those who own the banks that finances and control these expensive cars and houses you buy. They own factories where the material of your expensive clothes is mass-produced. They own the land on which affluent estate and houses are built. They own the mines that exploit our mineral resources. The bourgeoisies own the farms, the forest, and ocean economy, and the banks and the mines, and all other commanding heights of the economy. While we, the proletariat, we must sell our labor to them at a very exploitative rate to survive. Fighters, this is the most basic and fundamental cases made by the founding manifesto of the EFF and the 7 non-negotiable cardinal pillars. Economic power is the foundation of all organized life. Our relationship with the economy and the productive forces constitute the base, whilst all else, politics, religion, spirituality, art, and science constitute the superstructure which is informed and influenced by the base. Where will we worship our God, perform our customs and rituals, or advance politics, the arts and science, if we are alienated from the mineral resources of our land of birth? Even the basis of law arises out of the need to mediate the economic relations between the oppressed, the oppressor, and the oppressed. The economy is everything. This is why we must never separate the theoretical development of Marxism, which is our guiding tool of analysis, from practical activity. This must not be misrepresented to reject theoretical discourse and dialogue or seem as a call for mindless activism. Rather, our call for land reform, the nationalization of the banks and the mines, the ownership and control of all mineral resources and their local beneficiation must be located within the Marxist law of development of human history. Our primary enemy, therefore, remains monopoly capital, both locally and globally, which owns and controls the means of production. The motive forces that stand to benefit from the ultimate defeat of the bourgeoisie are the proletariat. The proletariat are the ordinary people of South Africa who remain landless, economically dominated, and excluded. Our fight for economic freedom in our lifetime must be located within the Marxist ideology of all history up to this point in existing society. Ours is a class struggle against capitalism, imperialism, and the alienation of our people from their mineral resources and wealth. The economy must be brought back into the hands of the people, and the victory of the poor and the working class who do not own the means of production against the elite and exploitative bourgeoisie class will sow the seeds of socialist state where all of us will share in the wealth and the riches of our land. Our government of the EFF will see the destruction of all classes and the creation of egalitarian society where all shall be free and equal and none will benefit at the expense of another. The understanding of classes is the cornerstone and foundation of understanding all Marxist theory and its application. If you have a full grasp of our class struggle, the historical development, and contemporary application, you will begin to appreciate Marxism as a tool of analysis and go on to explain it to our communities in their own languages. Comrades, President Vladimir Lenin, one of the ideological pillars of the very EFF we claim our membership to, in his writing, I quote, "Should we participate in bourgeois parliaments?" I close quote. Reflects on the importance of why we ought to participate in the electoral processes. Many amongst us forget why we participate in councils, legislatures, and parliament, and mistaken our participation as a means of personal achievement instead of it being part of a revolutionary task as leftist organization. Cheers. In his paper, Lenin reflects on a question that was troubling leftists in both Germany and Russia in the 19th century regarding the relevance and the necessity of parliaments and where the vanguard party should locate itself with regard to participation and the national consciousness of the working class at the time. Open quote, "Parliamentarism is of course politically absolute to the communists in Germany, but, and that is the whole point, we must not regard what is absolute to us as something absolute to a class, to the masses. Here again, we find that the lefts do not know how to reason, do not know how to act as the party of a class, as the party of the masses. You must not sink to the level of the masses, to the level of the backward strata of the class. That is incontestable. You must tell them the bitter truth. You are in duty bound to call their bourgeois, democratic, and parliamentary prejudices what they are, prejudices. But at the same time, you must soberly follow the actual state of the class consciousness and preparedness of the entire class, not only of its communist vanguard, and of all the working people, not only of the advanced elements. Participation in parliamentary election and in the struggle on the parliamentary platform is an obligatory on the party of the revolutionary proletariat, specifically for the purpose of educating the backward strata of its own class, and for the purpose of awakening and enlightening the underdeveloped, downtrodden, and ignorant rural masses. While you lack the strength to do away with bourgeois parliaments and every other type of reactionary institution, you must work within them, because it is there that you will still find workers who are misled by their priests, by the conditions of rural life. Otherwise, you risk turning into nothing but windbags." Close quote. Lenin continues, noting in his reflection on the progression of the Russian Revolution in different periods, how the Bolsheviks tactfully located themselves within parliament to reduce it to absurdity, while simultaneously organizing Soviets for the overthrow of parliaments that were initially deemed a paragon of democratic practices. He says, open quote, "There is a great usefulness during a revolution of a combination of mass action outside reactionary parliament with an opposition sympathetic, or better still, directly supporting the revolution within." Close quote. The mass action comes in the form of strikes in demands for various socio-economic changes that a bourgeois parliament simply cannot meet. While inside the very same parliament, there are legal parliamentarians who make the same demand. This is the most tactful way of forging a revolutionary program. The EFF exists in legislatures to fulfill the minimum revolutionary program and the basis and a blueprint of our revolutionary program, which we must always pursue while in the legislatures, is the 7 non-negotiable cardinal pillars of the EFF. Expropriation of land without compensation for equal redistribution in use, nationalization of mines, banks, and other strategic sectors of the economy without compensation, building state and government capacity, which will lead to the abolishment of tenders, free quality education, healthcare, housing, and sanitation. Of the Great October Revolution of 1917, Lenin. Fellow fighters, the Third National People's Assembly is not a task we are undertaking for its own sake. It is an integral part of what constitutes a revolution premised on Leninism. It is Lenin who teaches us that revolutionary party constituted by revolutionary class and led by professional revolutionaries must always be in the practice of democracy. It is Lenin who writes, I quote, "The whole party organization is now built on a democratic